Lovely to see the three of you. So I'm going to begin with you, Mark and Howard, because, as I was saying, GFSI is a body that is evolving, and it's addressing emerging food safety challenges in a context of really what is increasingly complex global supply chains. So can you just talk us through how GFSI's vision has evolved to meet some of those challenges? Let's begin with you, Mark.
Well, thank you, Isabel. Again, I'm Mark Freiling. I'm the Vice President of Food Safety and Quality at General Mills. I've been with General Mills for more than 30 years, which is shocking for me to say. To get to your question, it's actually the case that the vision, which is really related to food safety, has not changed. As with most visions, it is highly aspirational. And it's something that we are kind of using as a North Star, but not something that we really intend to achieve or believe we can fully achieve. A mission, which in our case is audited once, accepted everywhere, is something that is far more operational and kind of achievable. And what I would say has shifted over the last couple of years is a intensified focus on that mission. And how do we, as GFSI, make sure that we stay focused on what can we do to ensure that audits that are performed across the food safety system are held to that kind of consistent standard that is aligned with kind of global best practices.
Thank you, Mark. That helps, I think, really clarify things when you do have that dichotomy between the vision and mission and where they do come together. But Howard, what about from a retailer's perspective?
Well, thank you very much, and welcome, everyone. Howard Popola here with the Kroger Company. The Kroger Company has 2,500 retail stores, 32 manufacturing facilities, 44 distribution centers, 10 fulfillment centers all over the United States of America. We have products in our stores, in our label, and other CPG regional labels as well. Because of our model, which is a hill that we've decided to die on, fresh for everyone, it required that we work with small, medium suppliers in so many instances. And so our ecosystem as a company is very, very complex. We have well over 6,000 documented vendors who supply products into our stores. I cannot go to my CEO and say I need the resource to be in those 6,000 locations. I have to be very, very creative in how I do it. And this is where GFSI comes in for me. And as the co-chair of the steering committee, I have seen the value that the GFSI ecosystem can deliver so that I can continue and Kroger can continue to be that last mile for customers, looking for safe and nutritious foods to feed their family. The GFSI ecosystem enabled us to be able to deliver that promise and earn the trust of our customers. And when I talk about that ecosystem, you know who you are. It is our suppliers, it is our CBs, it is the CPOs, and everyone who take a part in making sure that food is safe.
Thank you very much, Howard. So, GFSI is enabling you to deliver on a promise. And so, Deanne, when I come to you, I think GFSI is also helping you deliver on promises, but also you are able to bring fresh perspective to the table as someone new to the GFSI steering committee. So can you tell us a little bit how you are being able to infuse this fresh perspective when it comes to the Race to the Top framework, and obviously particularly from your manufacturing viewpoint?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So Deanne Akins-Lewenthal with Mondelez, and You're right, I am new to the vice co-chair position within GFSI, which has been a great opportunity for me to step in and work even closer with GFSI with my co-vice chair, Tom, from Starbucks. And it's also a privilege to be able to work with Mark and Howard closely as well. So that's been great. But as you pointed out, yes, I'm new to this vice co-chair role, but also I still feel quite new to the steering committee. So I've represented Mondelez for the past 2 years. And I'm not the only one, right? We have quite a few members of the steering committee that have been new and come on since I've joined. And I think it's a great opportunity just to bring fresh sets of eyes, new perspectives, new experiences to the table, along with the wonderful people that were already there that help ground us in the background and the history and really help us move forward. So I think that's key on what we can bring to the table there. You know, it's already been mentioned that we spent the past 3 days as a steering committee meeting, and we had a great meeting, and as Mark also pointed out, we really took the time to ground ourselves into the mission, you know, and that mission of audited once, recognized everywhere. And I think it's really important that that mission is in service of the greater good of providing safe food for people everywhere. We're really just making sure that GFSI strategic priorities, you know, which is part of Race to the Top, is grounded back in that mission, right? And that we're really focused on the mission. And so we spent time, you know, after we grounded ourselves back to the mission, just asking the right questions, right? Having constructive dialogue, challenging ourselves to say, you know, are the priorities still the right priorities? Are they all of equal importance, right? Should we be pushing ahead in one area even faster than we are, and maybe pausing in other areas? And I think that's when you have the right people at the table, some with new eyes to really to challenge each other. I think we all came out, again, aligned to that mission, and I think with a fresh perspective of what we need to do to continue to push food safety forward.
And I guess it's also how you translate that mission. And you've had this steering committee meeting. So how, you know, from a retail perspective, how is Kroger, because this is a balancing act, isn't it? So how are you going to kind of balance sustainability goals with maintaining those absolutely critical, rigorous food standards?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. You know, with retailers, we want to be as fresh as possible. And we don't have the luxury of keeping perishables on the shelves forever and ever. And it's not a good day when you have to go to the landfill and take those out there as well, and you know, continue to fill the landfill without consideration for what it does to the environment or the generation coming. And so, over the last several years, Kroger has stemmed, you know, waste to landfill. We have built the digesters where possible in our manufacturing facilities to be able to treat wastewater before we set it out into the streams. And in addition to that, we've implemented several programs. One of them is called Divert, where we take perishable items that otherwise would go to the landfill, and we divert it into animal husbandry operation to feed animals. But the majority of it all is that we sworn to zero hunger, zero waste. We said that no child, no one will go hungry in communities that we serve. And so we work with Feeding America to make sure that products that are coming off of our shelves are diverted into several areas where they're needed to feed children or to supplement in areas where people don't have enough. Over the last year or so, Kroger has donated about 7 billion meals. You know, that is enough to feed San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York for 4 days in a row. That is what Kroger has done. And we have to balance this with food safety in mind. The last thing you want to do is to make people sick in the name of donating food to them. And so our company works very hard, our teams works very, very hard in making sure that while we are trying to be sustainable, we keep food safe as well.
Thanks so much, Howard. And once again, then we see this vision and mission coming together, a vision of kind of zero hunger, zero waste, but at the same time making sure that you are feeding people and keeping them safe and figuring out how to do that. So Mark, technological innovations are crucial. There are so many coming on stream now. How are they reshaping food management systems at General Mills?
Well, thanks for the question, Isabel. It's a time of, as you all know, very dynamic changes, especially kind of in the digital and technology space. And, I mentioned earlier, I've been with General Mills for more than 30 years, and I spent most of the first third of my career working in manufacturing plants. I still have responsibility for what happens in those plants, and so I visit a lot of those plants, and I can tell you that things are changing dramatically. And one of the key ways is that both in our food safety and quality teams, but also in our manufacturing teams, the dependence on data connectivity and sensors and signals that help us to see, is the product that we're making what we intend to make kind of before it gets to the end of the line, so that we can essentially steer the system towards target and reduce waste, which is good for our sustainability objectives, but more importantly, it's good for business. Consumers they do not want to be surprised by the product that they buy from the supermarket. They want what they want, and so the better that we can deliver that every single time, the more likely they are to come back to our big brands. And so it's a very, very good business choice, and it's good for the consumers.
Yeah, and it makes absolute sense. Well, I've got a question for all three of you, which I'm going to try and break down in different ways. But if we look at the global supply chain and we look at it in terms of a kind of resilience perspective, how would you say GFSI and initiatives within GFSI are helping in some respects to strengthen food safety practices? Could you pinpoint some of those for us? So, we've talked about harmonization of standards briefly, Dean. Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
Sure. I think harmonization of standards is key for GFSI moving forward. When we think about the purpose of GFSI, and that really is to benchmark food safety audit schemes to ensure they're meeting the benchmarking requirements, and those benchmarking requirements are put in place based on Codex, international food safety standards. So for me, the harmonization is just ensuring we have a level playing field, so to speak, when it comes to food safety, right? So we don't have varying levels of food safety out there when it comes to food safety audits. And, Dirk pointed out when he was on stage earlier, the amount of suppliers we have at Mondelez, right?
30,000.
30,000 suppliers, right? So, we have an expectation that those suppliers have a GFSI's recognized certificate. And I don't need to say which scheme do I want them to have, right? Because I know if they have a GFSI recognized certificate, they've used a scheme that's gone through the benchmarking process and has been recognized prior to getting that certificate. So to me, I think the area that GFSI needs to focus on and continue to get right is the harmonization piece.
Yeah, because that's vital. But what about the question of transparency? How does that fit into this? What would be your thoughts on that, Howard?
Transparency is, just like you said moments ago, a word that is going to be repeated over and over and over the last next 2 days. For us, transparency of the supply chain is very, very important. Given the number of suppliers that we have, when they give us an audit or an audit certificate, we trust that they are giving us the right thing. And so our charge is that we've trusted our CBs, we've trusted our CPOs that, whatever we get from you is the right thing, because our customers are trusting us to have the right products and safe products on the shelf for them. And so transparency to the entire ecosystem is very, very important, not only to us, but to everyone sitting here that has something to do with making consumers safe out there.
And I guess when you say transparency, I don't know if this applies to people in the room. Does it necessarily equate with clarity? Mark, do transparency and clarity, I assume they just have to come together.
I think transparency is necessary for clarity. So I think in order to be able to say for sure that things are equivalent and that they actually are delivering against what they are supposed to deliver on, we need to have the transparency to be able to dig in and look at the details of how was the benchmark met or not met, and if we see evidence in the marketplace that for some reason we have not delivered food safety, being able to get in and understand what led to that. Many of us in the room are food safety professionals, and that's a big part of what we do is when we have failures is getting to root cause and understanding what actually went the wrong direction and what could we put in place to fix that. So as I said, I think transparency and visibility are extremely important to drive clarity, because that clarity is what enables us to get to root cause and to solve the problem.
Okay, so let's just go. We have harmonization, we have transparency, and we have clarity. Would you say that they're going to be the three buzzwords we're going to be hearing again and again over the next 2.5 days?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Good. Okay. I like transparency and clarity, and that's good for me. Now, when we've spoken just earlier, you've talked about how enormous your supply chains are, and you're going to have big and small suppliers there. So how can you ensure and how can you engage with these smaller suppliers to ensure that they can meet these evolving standards we're talking about? Because it must be much trickier for them. And I think that's a question I'm going to have to ask each of you, because you all are engaging with different levels of suppliers and different sizes. Howard, over to you to start off with.
So we have a supplier onboarding team, and it goes by risk too. If we decide that a supplier is a high risk to the business, we would get involved with them. We would try to bring them up in the right way, make them ready for prime time. We also rely on players in the ecosystem, most of whom are sitting across me here, for help in bringing those suppliers along. So there are trainers in the audience here, there are CBs, there are consultants, that we can engage with, or we can direct these smaller suppliers to engage with to elevate their standards of food safety. I think ultimately, we are all looking for the same thing, safety of our consumers out there, and we all must do better with the parts that we play in that ecosystem in order to ensure that a customer, with a bag of groceries never have to think about whether the product they have in that bag is safe, but the experience they're going to have with that product.
Yeah, but it's testament to the job you do that as a consumer, I don't ever think about that. And so, well done. So Mark, what about you from your perspective? How do you engage with those smaller suppliers and make sure that they can keep up?
Well, it's certainly true that smaller companies have less history and less kind of maybe mature systems. That's not always true, but it's often true. But, smaller companies, let me start by saying this. The reality, and one of the great advantages that we have in this space, is that the standards that must be met to deliver safe food are not really business specific or geography specific. They certainly, there are some materials that have different risk categories that are more prominent than others, but we kind of are able to talk about, we understand what those different risks are, and the controls that need to be in place are fairly well known. And that is a big advantage for us in this space. So it really is at the core of this idea of harmonized benchmark requirements and kind of what must be true in order for a supplier to kind of meet what's necessary to deliver safe food. And so small suppliers may need to kind of shore up resources or to work a bit harder to meet those requirements, but the requirements are not specific to either a large supplier or a small supplier, or whether they happen to be located in Minneapolis or in Mumbai. It's not really different.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And so, do you see that same that same translation, I guess, of standards to big and small suppliers? It's the same requirements.
Exactly. It's the same requirements, and we probably all three have similar responses, right? Even with our supply base, we expect that GFSI recognized certificate. We expect to have the basic food safety systems in place where you have the same requirements, whether you're small, medium, or large. Like Howard mentioned, we also, have the ability to work with some key partners. There are suppliers out there in certain geographic regions that may not have GFSI recognized certification yet, so we will spend time with them, kind of coaching, helping build their food safety system with the intention, right, that they're on that journey for GFSI recognition. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle there. I think it's also fair to mention, also that's been said about using our colleagues and our peers in the industry to help in this space. But I also think it's also good to bring up tools, and right, and GFSI released, what was that, a year and a half ago, our Global Markets program, and relaunched that space. And there is a tool online that's free that small companies can use and go in and do self-assessments to understand what their gaps are for their food safety system, and some training materials. It's not a certification, right? So let's make that clear. It's not a certification. But for me, it's just a tool in a toolbox that can be used for small businesses on their journey of improving food safety and meeting that GFSI recognition standard we're all expecting from them.
And that's a really important point, and thank you very much for mentioning that they are the tools available, and they are free. So that does actually level the playing field to a certain degree. But let's just look ahead now. So if we're to look to the next 3 to 5 years, let's say, so kind of short term, what would you say are the critical priorities for GFSI to ensure this continued advancement when it goes to global food safety? And I guess we're coming back to this vision and mission, but it's not for me to answer. I'm going to begin with you, Howard.
Well, we've had a very, very engaging last 3 days as a steerco. And I'd be first to admit that oftentimes GFSI tries to be everything to everybody. But we've sharpened our focus, and our focus is right on the mission of GFSI, which is all around benchmarking. We want to make sure that GFSI continues to play that role of benchmarking across the entire ecosystem. Work with our CPOs on the issues that we need to work on, and move the industry ahead with the best standards possible. I'm sure that Mark and Deanne would have a few things to add, because I don't want to steal the entire thunder here.
It's difficult when you're the last one, so I'm going to go to you, Deanne, and then Mark's got the difficult role this time around.
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning of the session, I am the new vice co-chair for manufacturing, and in that role, I'm leading the public-private partnership subcommittee. So I think that's another area that we need to continue to strengthen the dialogue with regulators as we think about progressing food safety for the future over the next 3 to 5 years. GFSI has done a lot in this space over the past few years, and really meeting with regulators, explaining, what is GFSI, explaining the benchmarking process, just really answering their questions. But I think there's more that we can do in this space. Food safety is a shared responsibility amongst all of us. So having the forums to come together and talk with the regulators is really important. I'm really pleased that we're going to be hosting another government to business meeting Thursday afternoon after the conference is over. So we've not met in person in 2 years since the Atlanta conference. So I'm excited. We have regulators that are going to be present with the private sector in that meeting. And we're really going to do a couple of things. One, it provides a space for everyone to come share best practices. We're going to talk a bit about voluntary third-party assurance programs and how GFSI fits in that that system and how GFSI can be used as part of regulators' risk-based approach within their countries. And we're going to tackle a little bit around, digital transformation and innovation, but really just come together and brainstorm how can we partner, what are the synergies, what are the opportunities that we can work together on, all for that greater good of food safety. So I'm excited after Thursday to be able to share the outcome of that meeting.
Well, you're going to be exhausted.
Yeah, yes.
Mark.
Yeah, so, maybe I'll pull a couple of threads that'll pull this thing together here. We started by talking about our vision, which is moving towards safer food supplies, our mission, which is really around harmonization and benchmarking. And, to that end, there is a huge demand, both within the space that many of you represent, manufacturers and retailers, but also with regulators, to feel confident that when an audit has occurred against a GFSI recognized scheme, that it's legitimate. And so we continue to believe that a mechanism, a tool that will help facilitate that is something that's really important for us. And we've been continuing to work on that. I know it's been a longer term priority for GFSI, and it's been harder than, frankly, any of us thought it would be. I think that we've had some real breakthroughs recently, and that we're hopeful that this is something we will really be able to realize quite soon. And it is it's in part the digital evolution needed to kind of catch up with what we wanted to do. So.
Okay, and then just to round off, because you're obviously very dedicated professionals. It's extremely clear. What about the personal side? And I always like the personal side. So let's dig in here. What made you? Because I've been having conversations with Mark about this earlier. What made you kind of steer towards this path of working to food safety? You're the unsung heroes in many respects, of kind of like working so hard behind the scenes to make sure the food people eat is safe. So I'll begin with you, Mark.
Well, thanks for that question. And this one's kind of fun for me because I truly am an example of someone who did not know kind of anything about what the future would hold when I came to General Mills. And General Mills, for those of you that don't know, it's a very large food company, one of the largest in the world. Some of the brands that you may be familiar with here in Ireland or in Europe are Nature Valley, Old El Paso, Haagen-Dazs, and then we have huge businesses in the US and other parts of the world that may be less familiar to you, but a big, big food company. What you almost certainly don't know is that I joined General Mills out of finishing a doctoral degree in analytical chemistry. And I had literally never taken a class in food science or microbiology or any of the things that you think would be normal for a person coming into this type of an operation. And the reason I came to General Mills was a couple of things. One is I knew that I didn't want to be just a research chemist. I wanted to be a technical leader. The second thing that brought me to the company was I knew the brands. As I said, we have big brands that are really important in people's lives, and I knew I liked them. And then probably third and maybe most important, I liked the people that I met. The people were engaged with each other. They were engaged with the company. And so I took a chance, really, and joined the company. And one of the things, we met yesterday afternoon with a bunch of undergraduate students from Ireland, I took a chance and joined the company, and I shared this with them. And one of the things that I discovered is that food and the food safety space is very technical, and there are lots of interesting problems to work on. And, over the course of my career, I have really never stopped feeling like there were things that I could learn and grow. And so I've stayed satisfied, and I've stayed really engaged. And, I'm now at a point in my career where I'm trying to make a difference at an industry level, and I hope I'm doing that.
Wow. I think that's amazing. What about you, Deanne?
Yeah, so like Mark, I did not think, growing up that I would end up in food safety. Quite honestly, I'm not sure I knew what even food science was when I started college. I knew I wanted to be in a science field. I knew I wanted it to be in an applied science field. When I decided to go to graduate school, I met someone that was in the food safety department, and she introduced me to just what food science was, and it just resonated with me. Growing up, being in the kitchen with my mother and my grandmothers, that's what I did. Food was such a central part of our life that it just made sense to me when I found the food science department that was kind of the direction I wanted to go. Having a microbiology focus was the route I decided to go, and after spending a few years in my doctoral program doing research, I thought, I want a faster paced life. So I joined industry, and I think I just found a real passion. What we do affects people every day, everyone's lives, and I think that's just rewarding, and it helps me to get up in the morning and, put a smile on and know what we're doing is a value and really driving impact to the greater society. And that's meaningful for me as a profession.
Yeah, well, it's a global impact, which is amazing, and I think there's very few professions that can say that they have such a kind of deep impact in every part of people's lives. What about you, Howard?
Growing up, I enjoy gardening and growing food. And then right around 11th grade, there was a call for an essay by the United Nations Food Program. I wrote an essay that was adjudged to be the best. It was all about food. I got a scholarship to go to college from the United Nations Food Program. And 4 years after, and a degree in microbiology, I knew where I was going to end up. And so I started my career with the United Nations Food Program. And over 3 years, and as a single guy, lived out of a suitcase, I saw so many food manufacturing facilities that manufactured non-perishable items for war-torn areas for the United Nations. And so that didn't dampen my interest. In fact, it actually made me want more of the food industry. Haven't seen them all, and so you can see it in my career. I have dairy in my career. I have beef in my career. I have poultry in my career. I've been in food service. I've been on the manufacturing side and now on the retail side. That accumulated experience has helped me in my position today, and as well as the co-chair of the GFSI SteerCo in advancing food safety type responsibilities amongst my colleagues, share ideas with them. And I always say to folks, food is meant to be eaten, but it's meant to be safe as well.
Thank you very much to the three of you. You're three really passionate individuals, and I know there's so many other passionate individuals here in the room. You're people, people persons, I think that's probably the better way of putting it, and you're driven by passion for one of the most incredible kind of like jobs around. So huge thank you to the three of you for sharing those personal stories and also the mission and visions that are underlying GFSI today. Thank you very much.